This is the story of a catastrophic miscalculation. What looked like a series of disjointed public relations stumbles over the past year is actually a devastating metaphor for a much darker psychological reality. It began with a seemingly innocent comment about desperately missing the simple act of going grocery shopping and appeal to universal human grounding. But against the backdrop of 27 car convoys, armed guards, and the glaring absence of actual public mobs, that simple comment exposed the central contradiction of Meghan Markle's post-royal life. The overwhelming threat of being ignored had finally replaced the phantom threat of being hounded. In this video, we're going to unpack the final collapse of an unprecedented global image. We will examine the precise timeline of how a quest for absolute power unraveled into staggering commercial desperation. We will look at the newly surfaced revelations regarding an intense early fixation on Prince William and what that means for the shattered relationship with the British monarchy. More importantly, we will dissect the subtle, deeply troubling social media signals that suggest a definitive moral pivot. We will explore how the very boundaries established to protect a family are now being dismantled to salvage a failing lifestyle brand. By the end, you will understand exactly why this is no longer a story about escaping the institution, but a desperate scramble to commodify the wreckage left behind. To truly comprehend the gravity of this fall, we must first remember the staggering height from which it began. Cast your mind back to the golden era of 2018. Meghan Markle did not just marry into the British royal family. She was handed the keys to the ultimate global platform. She was armed with immense goodwill, backed by billions of dollars in institutional prestige, and positioned as the modernizing force of a thousand-year-old empire. She had the ear of world leaders, the protection of the crown, and a level of historical relevance that money simply cannot buy. It was an era defined by limitless potential. The public was entirely captivated, ready to champion a new kind of royal. To look at that pinnacle of power and compare it to the current reality of hawking fruit preserves and desperately pitching lifestyle shows to streaming executives is to witness a breathtaking masterclass in self-sabotage. The contrast is devastating. The billionaire public relations machinery has entirely given way to the cold, undeniable reality of a fading cultural footprint. The fracture, it seems, did not begin with the media or the British public. According to recent forensic analysis and insider revelations, the psychological rupture started at the very top, within the private corridors of the monarchy, and it centered entirely on the future king. Reports have surfaced detailing a staggering level of infatuation Meghan allegedly directed toward Prince William in the early days of her introduction to the family. Observers noted a longing, an intense visual fixation that made rooms uncomfortable. But to dismiss this as mere romantic infatuation is to miss the true nature of the tragedy. Prince William did not just represent a brother-in-law, he represented the absolute summit of the hierarchy. He was the reigning power, the ultimate authority, the very embodiment of the crown she had married adjacent to. For a woman driven by an unyielding desire to dominate every room she enters, being relegated to the supporting cast was intellectually and emotionally unacceptable. The tragedy of the Sussex marriage was quietly cemented in these early interactions. William, perceptive and intensely guarded, recognized the machinery of this ambition immediately. He established an impenetrable boundary from day one, ensuring he was never left alone in a room with her, effectively neutralizing what could have been a disastrous PR trap. He saw the calculation behind the charm, and in realizing she could never conquer or leverage the future king, Meghan was forced to confront the bitter reality that she had to settle for the secondary prize. She secured the prince, but she lost access to the power. This early, silent rejection by William is the psychological ghost that haunts every destructive decision that followed. Denied the ultimate royal authority, the strategy shifted to creating an illusion of supreme global importance. And nothing projects importance quite like the theater of security. For years, the public has been subjected to endless complaints, grueling court battles, and millions of dollars spent demanding top-tier, state-funded protection. The narrative was clear: they were simply too famous, too targeted, and too important to exist safely in the regular world. She publicly claimed that she could not even go to a local grocery store without risking chaos. But public events have a ruthless way of exposing the truth. When Prince Harry visited Ukraine, a literal war zone, he did so without the suffocating, paralyzing attention they claim follows them everywhere. When the couple made appearances in Geneva and Australia, the public response was jarringly quiet. The streets behind the crowd control barriers were empty. Unbothered bystanders walked past without a second glance. The uncomfortable truth slowly crystallized for the public. They could live whatever ordinary life they wanted in Montecito. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, regularly navigates local errands without a fraction of this hysteria. The security detail was no longer about actual protection. It had become a vital organ of the brand. Heavy security creates optics. It forces people to look twice to speculate, to assume importance where there is none. When you require a heavily armed escort to walk you to a seat at a celebrity art show, surrounded by A-listers with infinitely larger global profiles who walked in unescorted, the illusion breaks. The performance of importance had become vastly larger than the public interest itself. It stopped looking like a defense mechanism and started looking like a deeply embarrassing display of vanity. It was a fabricated spectacle meant to convince the world and perhaps themselves that they still mattered. And they needed to matter because the commercial empire was beginning to show fatal cracks. The launch of the American Riviera Orchard brand was supposed to be the grand pivot. It was meant to position Meghan alongside the titans of high-end lifestyle commerce. But the reality of the business world is unforgiving. It requires more than a royal title and a calligraphy logo. The launch of her signature fruit spread quickly descended into a logistical and public relations nightmare. Jams sat unused, expiration dates loomed, and international trademark and food regulation laws ground any potential global expansion to a halt. The financial returns were reportedly microscopic compared to the staggering burn rate of their California lifestyle. The realization was cold and sharp without the institutional weight of the British royal family. Her personal brand lacked the gravity to command the luxury market. The global audience was not interested in buying overpriced marmalade from a duchess in exile. Cornered by commercial failure and a rapidly dwindling cultural relevance, a new and deeply unsettling strategy began to emerge. Up until this point, there was one unbreakable rule, one moral high ground, that they had fiercely defended the absolute privacy of their children. The core manifesto of their entire departure from the royal family was rooted in shielding their son and daughter from the toxic consumption of the public eye. It was the shield they used to deflect every criticism. But then the subtle social media signals began to shift. A mirror selfie appeared, taken in a sprawling walk-in wardrobe, featuring a rare glimpse of her daughter with the carefully curated caption, "Mama's little helper." During promotional pushes for the lifestyle brand, casual mentions of her children's specific tastes in fruit spreads began leaking into the press. These were not accidents. In the world of high-stakes celebrity PR, nothing is an accident. Every post is bristling with calculated significance. This is where the story crosses a point of no return. As the Netflix views drop and the lifestyle brand stalls, the ultimate boundary is dissolving. The moral contradiction is glaring and devastating. The very children who were supposedly removed from the royal institution to protect them from being used as public commodities are now being slowly, methodically introduced to save a failing commercial enterprise. The aesthetic of royalty in exile is no longer enough to sell products. The final desperate card is about to be played, and it is a card that will permanently shatter whatever remains of their initial moral crusade. They are preparing to cross a line that will fundamentally alter how history judges them. The decision to monetize the children is not merely a shift in public relations strategy. It is the total collapse of their founding narrative. When a brand built on the premise of escaping exploitation begins to exploit its own most closely guarded assets, it signals a terrifying level of commercial desperation. For years, the public was lectured on the absolute sanctity of Archie and Lilibet's privacy. They were positioned as the ultimate victims of a ravenous media ecosystem, rescued just in time by parents willing to sacrifice everything for their protection, to now weave them into the fabric of a failing lifestyle brand, to use their names, their images, and their preferences to push fruit preserves and potential clothing lines is a devastating moral contradiction. It tells the world that privacy was never a fundamental principle. It was merely a commodity hoarded until it was financially necessary to cash it in. This profound ethical pivot is being watched closely not just by a disillusioned public, but across the Atlantic behind the closed doors of the institution they abandoned. The silence from the British royal family has never been more deafening nor more strategic. In the early days of the Sussex departure, there was a public expectation of a bitter ongoing war of words, but the palace chose a different weapon. Absolute unyielding restraint, and in doing so they allowed the Sussexes to dismantle their own credibility. When you place the current reality of the two brothers side by side, the contrast is staggering. On one side you have the Prince of Wales, a man aging with quiet dignity, shouldering the immense weight of the crown, and stepping into his role as a global statesman. On the other you have a man permanently tethered to an endless cycle of self-promotion, airing family grievances to an increasingly apathetic audience, while his wife scrambles to secure placement for a jar of jam on a Hollywood celebrity's breakfast table. This is where Tan Vuong Williams' early impenetrable boundaries look less like sibling rivalry, more like a masterstroke of institutional self-preservation. William recognized the inherent danger of a personality that demanded absolute focus and rejected the established hierarchy. By cutting off access, by refusing to engage in the chaotic emotional theater that defined the Sussex exit, William protected the crown from being dragged into a bargain basement reality television narrative. He understood that the moment you negotiate with commercial desperation, you degrade the mystique of the monarchy. The permanent rift between the brothers is no longer about a misunderstood wife or an argument over bridesmaids' dresses. It is a fundamental divide between a life of duty and a life of desperate commercialization. The royal family did not exile them, they simply stopped providing the oxygen required to sustain their illusion of supreme importance. And what of Prince Harry in the quiet, isolated corners of Montecito? The psychological toll of this descent must be profound. He traded the unparalleled institutional support, the military honors, and the genuine global respect of his birthright for a life entirely dependent on his wife's commercial instincts. And those instincts are failing. The man who once commanded the Invictus Games stage with undeniable gravitas is now a silent partner in a vanity project that cannot even navigate basic international export laws. He has become the ultimate collateral damage in a quest for Hollywood domination that never materialized. The tragedy of Prince Harry is that he believed he was breaking free to find his voice, only to realize he had surrendered his entire identity to become the supporting character in a brand that the world is no longer buying. The subtle shifts in their public output betray a frantic search for a viable plan B. The initial promises of producing high-minded, world-changing philanthropic content have quietly vanished, replaced by the grim reality of influencer economics. There is talk of monetizing wardrobe choices, of pivoting to mother-daughter clothing lines, of leveraging the aesthetic of their daily lives because the intellectual and philanthropic capital has completely run dry. They are transitioning from self-proclaimed global changemakers to everyday tastemakers, hoping that the very public they have repeatedly alienated will suddenly want to dress like them. It is a staggering downgrade. The aura of royalty has been entirely stripped away, leaving behind nothing but the hollow machinery of celebrity hustle. This is why the public remains so captivated, and why this story resonates far beyond the confines of royal gossip. It is a modern, real-time tragedy of hubris. It is a forensic study of what happens when you mistake a powerful platform for personal gravity. Meghan Markle believed that the magic of the British monarchy was something she could pack into a suitcase and replicate in California. She believed the crowds, the security, and the deference were a reaction to her inherent brilliance, rather than the institutional weight of the thousand-year-old crown she was permitted to wear. The slow, painful unraveling of that delusion is what keeps the audience watching. It is a cautionary tale about the devastating consequences of weaponizing victimhood, burning bridges with genuine support networks, and isolating oneself in an echo chamber of relentless ambition. As we look toward the future, the trajectory seems coldly inevitable. The further they drift from the source of their original relevance, the more extreme the commercial pivots will become. The brand will require constant, exhausting reinvention just to tread water. The privacy of the children will continue to be slowly chipped away piece by piece, as the demand for intimate access becomes the only currency they have left to trade. The illusion of absolute power has been permanently shattered, replaced by the exhausting, deeply unglamorous reality of trying to convince the world that you still matter. Thank you for watching this deep dive into the true cost of the royal exit. If you appreciate analysis that cuts through the noise and looks at the stark psychological and PR realities behind the headlines, please subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss an unvarnished look at the stories that shape our culture. Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and we will see you in the next breakdown.